Hey everyone, this is Processing Trauma Out Loud with Candace and Cher. But today it's just Cher here with a good friend of ours, Daniel Herron. And Daniel is a part of the online collective that Candace and I are a part of with The Broken and Beautiful. And so we're just getting to know Daniel. And he and I have had a beautiful conversation here for a while this morning. And Daniel, I am really excited for our conversation ahead and just the things that we talked about already that I'm excited to
hmm
bring to our listeners. But before we do that, just can you give us a little introduction of who you are and what you
Yeah,
do, and let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you?
sure. Yeah. Um, so I'm Daniel, and let me just first say that I feel really honored to be here. Sure. And one of the reasons why is because you told me that you've never had a male guest on your podcast and that your listeners are mostly women. And so I feel honored to hold that first male presence
Mm,
space. And I hope I can do that in a way that women feel safe. Um,
thank
that's a big deal for me. So, yeah. So what I do, I call myself a healing guide, a trauma and transformation coach. And so the work that I do with people is journeying through their stories, and walking alongside kind of as a guide as people walk through their stories and try to find the root causes of some of the behaviors they have that they'd want to change, and look at their stories and see the places of harm and the places of grief, and have a place to tell their story in a way where they will be held in gentleness and kindness. And that is not necessarily something normal that comes from a man. And so to hold that space from a male perspective is a gift that I really get to give to people.
you.
So I can be reached at musathewild.com. Musa is my middle name. It's a Swahili name. It means Moses. It's spelled Musa. So musathewild.com is the best way to reach me, but you can also email me at musathewild@gmail.com.
Mm, welcome. Yes, and I love that you mentioned that because yes, this is a first on the podcast after over 3 years of weekly
Wow.
episodes. And we think that our demographic is mostly women, but every now
Okay.
and then we hear from men too. So
Okay.
we do know. But
Okay.
yes, it does feel really good to have you here, and I'm happy for our listeners to hear your voice
Mm,
this
thank
week
you.
and next week, and I'm sure in the future too, because I could foresee many more conversations with you, Daniel.
Yes. Sounds great.
So when I asked you about some topics that you would like to discuss, you gave me several that just I found so interesting. And
hmm
so one of the things that we've been talking together about this morning is what does it mean to be fully alive as a human, and how do we sometimes shut that down in ways that really just cause us to get caught in these cycles of deep suffering and ongoing suffering. And
hmm
yeah, can you just share some of your thoughts on that topic to get us started here?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I realized in my own story is that I had been pushed away from my humanity. That by culture, system, family, religion, I was being moved away from what it was to be human, and that's something I realized, only maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But as I realized that, and as I had been healing and embracing, okay, what is it to be human? I began to find a lot of peace and a lot of freedom, and that allowed me to experience a lot more joy and happiness in my life. And so this idea of learning, like taking a deep dive and learning about what it is to be human and how that can eliminate unnecessary suffering in my life, has become kind of this cause or purpose or mission that I'm on, is to find what is it to be human. Um, yeah. So for example, one of the things as a boy, and I don't think this is just boys, but as a boy, I was not allowed to feel. And it was never really a spoken message of you're not allowed to feel. It was just all this, it was the conditioning of the culture and the society around me of like, don't feel sad because that's weakness. Don't feel, afraid because that's weakness. Don't feel sad because you're a man, you're a boy. You can't feel that way. The only emotion that's you're welcome to is anger. And what that did to me was move me away from who I am, because what I have found out is that the truth of who I am is that I was a hypersensitive boy. I could have had the diagnosis. I didn't as a child, but I could have had the diagnosis of hypersensitive, and I've got a daughter who is. Um, and so when as a boy who was not allowed to feel, that really pushed me away from the essence of who I was
Mm,
as a human.
yeah. Which feels so important, right? Because it's cutting off this whole aspect of the reality of your brain.
Yeah.
Every human brain has areas that are specifically designed for emotional receptivity and emotional expression.
Hmm.
And to disallow a human
Hmm.
to function in and from that part of their brain is like you're saying, it's causing us to not be allowed to be fully human.
Yeah.
And yet, and you're talking about it from a boy perspective. I think a lot of times what I hear from women is the way that they have felt, and I'll use the word cursed, kind
Mm,
of that their emotions have been cursed, is that they are too much.
right. Dramatic. Yeah.
Yes. Too
Hmm.
loud,
Exactly.
too sad, too many tears, too,
Right.
um, and I've heard so many men in my life say this statement, which I just don't like it. It's like, I'm the thinker, she's the
Mm,
feeler.
right.
And I just feel like it's such a disservice to both men and
Hmm.
women when that distinction is made. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, because really, we are both,
Hmm.
men and women are both thinkers and feelers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain and how he talks about it?
Yes, I think I have, but go ahead and talk us through it.
I think this is a really important part of what it is to be human. So in Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain, you've got the brain stem, which is the wrist,
Hmm.
and that is the experiential part of our brain. It's like the part of our brain that's outside of our consciousness. So for example, our ability to walk sits in the experiential part of our brain because we learned to walk by experience. If we had to think about every movement that it took, then we would never get anywhere, right? Because we'd have to think about each muscle we move and whatnot. So that sits in that experiential part of our brain, which is the brain stem. And that takes in like all of our nervous system, all of this information. And then the next on top of that, we've got the amygdala, which is represented by the thumb in your palm. And that's the amygdala is like the emotional center of the brain. And so as information comes in, it comes in through our experience and then it goes through our amygdala. And then on top of that is the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
And the prefrontal cortex is what we call the thinking part of our brain. It's our rational thought. And that's not fully developed in us as humans until we're 26 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so the flow of information is that it goes through our brainstem, through our amygdala, then it finally gets to cognitive thought. And so if somebody says I'm a thinker, they've actually like taken this huge part of the process out of the way information actually gets to cognitive
Mhm.
thought. And
Yeah.
we've been taught that we can control our emotions and we can control our bodily expression by rational thought, when that's actually very little of that is true. We can't control very much of our emotional experience or experiential part of our brain with cognitive thought because the flow of information is bottom up.
Yeah.
Very little of it is actually top down.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's the proof that before that really that is the flow. Like, this is truth. The
Yes.
truth is we feel it in our body. then we feel it emotionally, then we can process it or
Hmm.
figure out strategies or directions or goals or whatever. But to say I am not emotional is to say I am not human,
That's right. That's
right?
exactly. If I'm the thinker, means I'm not human. Yeah.
I'm not human.
Or I've learned to disassociate from a part of my humanity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like I almost feel like I got goosebumps a little bit there because I think it's this thing of, and we often make this declaration of ourselves, I am not human. It's really what we are saying. And you
Yeah.
and I had a little bit of a conversation like, okay, if we're not human, then what are we? What and we can't even really come up with a word, right?
Hmm.
We kind of tossed around robotic or but really the reality is we are human.
Hmm.
We do feel in our body and then we
Hmm.
do feel emotionally and then but when we have to deny that or when we have been taught to and trained
Hmm.
to,
Hmm.
we're not we are not able to be what I like to say, we're not able to be courageous, free and fully alive
Hmm.
if we're
Yeah.
denying that. And so
Amen.
your experience as a boy and as a man was that you had to really distance yourself from a part of who you were that was a huge
Hmm.
part, as because you had this awareness and your family had this awareness, even though they might not have honored it with the term highly sensitive, but everyone around you knew
Hmm.
that you were highly sensitive.
Right. Instead, they called me wild. I was wild and out of control,
Yeah.
and all those names that came with it. This place of where my parents thought, well, the only way to control them is to control him is to get more rigid, more punitive.
Yeah.
And so as I grew up, that's what continued to happen. They would get more rigid, more violent, more punitive, because
Mhm.
that's what they were taught that they were supposed to do. You spare the rod, you spoil the child. And so either I was going to be spoiled, or they were going to beat me into, some sort of compliance.
Wow.
Yeah.
And in one sense, it kind of worked because it caused you to stop being human,
Well, right.
right?
They, yeah, exactly. It's a good point, because when a couple years ago, when Ukraine was first being invaded,
Yeah.
and we would see the troves of refugees coming off the trains and off that. One of the things that one of the mental health uh, therapists who was out there helping was saying was like, "Hey, it's when we know we're in trouble is when the kids have stopped crying.
Mm.
That's when we know we're in trouble."
Wow.
When they stop emotion, when they are blank, when they come off the train, we know they have already moved into a place of dissociation from the trauma that's happening. If
Mm.
they're coming and they're still crying and they're still emoting, then we're okay. We can really help them there. But if they have gone beyond that point, and so that's what we do to a lot of our children, is we move them into this place of compliance, which is actually just silence. The children should be seen but not heard.
Yeah.
But the only way to do that is to move your child into dissociation. And that is a very, very harmful place to be moved into.
Mm. And why can you put a few more words to that? Why is dissociation a very harmful place for a child to be?
Yeah, because that is disassociation is only happens when you're too overwhelmed to be able to take in what's happening around you, or you're not being met in what's happening around you. And that state of overwhelm that then moves into dissociation is the definition of trauma.
Yeah.
That's when something becomes traumatic, is when it's not the situation that's not traumatic. It is what happens inside of us that causes the trauma. And
Mm.
when that happens, we are fractured inside of ourselves. We are disconnected, dissociated. We have to fracture and put a part of us away,
Mm.
And that's what trauma does. It silos those places away. And then
Yep.
they stay there, disconnected, trapped, stuck away, but they rule our lives. They're the undercurrent that rules our lives. And we wonder why this happens. Well, it's because we've got this thing in our past that's stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's what we talk about so much on this podcast is the
exactly.
effects of that trauma in in our lives and the lives of many that we know and work with and are friends with who are making our way out of that place of dissociation and learning what it means to become more fully alive, more fully human again. And what for
Right.
you, like, do you want to share a little bit of your story of what what that was like for you to kind of recognize that
Hmm.
dissociation and that disconnection and begin to long for something more or something different?
Yeah. 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 Uh, so I would say in my story, I grew up as a missionary kid. And one of the things they say about missionary kids is that they experience more loss in their lives than most people experience in their entire lifetime because you have people coming in and out of your life, all the time. So we're on the mission field, we're disconnected from family, disconnected from community in a big way. And then you have people who come in for a year or 2 months or a month or 2 weeks at a time, and they are people that are like us. And so as children, we really connect to those people. I remember like lying in their laps and being held by them, and then 2 weeks later they're gone, and it's gone. It's never We never see them again. We don't know them. We never know them. And so that's an incredible amount of loss because you have this deep connection with somebody and then you have this loss and then it's just never talked about. It's never
Mhm.
talked about in the sense of that's a loss that you're able to grieve.
Yeah.
It's just what life is.
Mm.
And so we grow up with this incredible loss. Well, then for me, add on top of that, when I was 15, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. I was at boarding school from the time I was in seventh grade till I graduated from high school. So I was a junior in high school when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. A friend of my parents came to the campus to tell me
Mm.
that it had happened because my parents were, wherever they were.
Mm.
I think they were actually in the States at that point, and I was back in Kenya. And so, you're living in this really disconnected way.
Mm.
And at that point of my life, I had already disassociated because of what was happening in my life. I learned that feeling was not okay, and so I remember the time when my dad was spanking me for the umpteenth time, and I vowed to myself I'm never going to feel again. And I
Mm.
just turned and stared at him while he was spanking me, and he tells me to this day that was the point when he stopped spanking me because I stopped reacting to
Mm.
the spanking. It was no longer making any impact. So fast forward, I'm 15. My mom's sick with cancer. I do not know how to feel at all.
Mm.
6-year battle with cancer. I go through college, graduate from college. She passes away after I graduate from college, and so then there's just this incredible loss. But I have no idea how to feel, so I have no idea how to grieve. So I just carry It's another piece of trauma that I just carry with me
Mm.
because I just stuff it away. I stuff it away, and then fast forward, let's see, maybe 10 more years, and I have my kids. And the only emotion that I've been able to feel my whole life is anger. And
Mm.
the anger for me boils into rage. And so I'm looking at these little beings, 0, 1, 2 years old. They have no control over what they're doing. And I feel rage at them. And
Mm.
my wife and I are like, okay, you need to get some help. I'm like, yeah, I think I need to get some help. And so I go and I start to get some help. And one of the things that I immediately start to know as I'm getting the help, I went to an intensive weekend, and then I joined this group of men that were doing men's work. And it was really helpful for me. But one of the things I began to know and became aware of was that I held this immense amount of grief that I could not touch
Mm.
because every time I would get close to it, it would just like leave my system, like whoosh. I would start to talk about it, but the minute I hit it directly, like the tears would be right in my eyes. But the minute I started to talk about it directly,
Mm.
it's gone. Like,
Oh.
and I learned that that's what dissociation is you come to that point of overwhelm and then you're numb
Mhm.
and you don't really have any control over that
Mm.
place. I didn't have any control over it. In fact, I wanted to emote at those times, but I
Mm.
just couldn't access it. And so finally I went on a retreat. It was an incredible weekend that was a men's weekend, but it was all staffed by women. And it was women holding this container for men to kind of heal and deal with some of their feminine wounds. I came into it with the intention of grieving my mom because that was the feminine wound I was aware of at that moment.
Mm.
And so there was this moment in that weekend where I'm sitting in front of a woman and she's holding my hands. And then one of the leaders, who's a woman, comes up behind me and she says, "Is it okay if I put my arms around you?" And so I said yes. And so she envelops me with her arms. And then the music is playing. And then the next line of the song, like right after she puts her arms around me, is, "And for those of you who have lost someone."
Mm.
And that just
Mm.
that opened it up for me. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what I've needed all along. Is I've needed a gentle place where I'm held and I know I'm cared for,
Mm.
to be able to feel, to be able to connect to emotion. And so the floodgates kind of opened for me there.
Mm.
Yeah. And and then it was 2 years for me of, and my wife was scared because she's like, she didn't know if I was ever going to come out of it because it
Mm.
was every day tears, hours of tears.
Mm.
Um, and so what I learned is that I was grieving my mom's death, but then as I grieved my mom's death, that it opened the door to all the other loss I was carrying in my life.
Wow.
And it opened the door to this hypersensitive little boy who had never been able to feel, never been able to cry for all the losses. And so I just, for 2 years, that's what I did every day.
Wow.
Cry. In I would be on the phone with a friend, and I got some great gifts there. And one of these friends was another woman, and I was like, I feel like I just need to lie on the floor and cry. And she's like, "Why don't you just lie on the floor and cry?" I was
Mm.
like, "I can do that." She's like, "Yeah, you can do that." So I hung up and I lay on the floor in the basement and I just cried. And
Yeah.
I just remember those times, like I needed permission to do that. I needed to know I was okay. I needed to be held. I
Mm.
needed a gentle, safe environment to do that in. Um, and over those 2 years, I emptied out a whole big well of grief.
Wow. Mm. I'm just hearing the largeness of
Mm-hmm.
that and also the way that it came, the breaking through was in this just, exquisitely designed by God, I will say. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody could have planned the dynamics there.
Mm-hmm.
That was exactly what your heart needed for that because you were wanting it. You just couldn't. And I can really relate so much to what you're saying because for me, I also could not access my grief and the
Mm-hmm.
tears would be so close and they would just be ready to come and I would yawn.
Yeah.
And the
Mm.
yawn, it was this involuntary response. I would yawn
Mhm.
and then it was gone.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sometimes I would just try to not yawn, right?
Yeah.
Like I was consciously aware that the yawn is going to take it away and I was longing for the
Mhm.
release. I think for
Yeah, that's
people
right.
who know the agony of grief that just will not break through,
Mhm.
there is an agony there that it's there, it's stuck, but you just
Mhm.
can't find the way. And then in the having to hold it,
Yeah.
year after year,
Yeah.
It's a heavy weight that, exactly as we're saying here, keeps us from being able to really be fully alive as a human.
That's right. That's right. And it's a paradoxical kind of backwards kind of place, because I think what we tend to do there is be like, what's wrong with me that I can't get there, that I can't,
Mm.
and that actually does the same thing that was done to us. Like, something's wrong with you that you're crying. Something, we're asking that question of ourselves, what's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And the counterintuitive kind of paradoxical place is that we have to allow ourselves to be there, that it's okay that it happens.
Yeah.
And that's what we need for, because I would say that stop, that yawn, that dissociation for me
Yeah.
is a protective mechanism that I learned.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a protector who is there, because if I had released as a child, I would have been more traumatized, right?
Yeah.
Or if I had released in other places, I would have
Mhm.
again felt that trauma. And so that protector was really
Mhm.
doing me a favor
Yeah.
for a long part of my life, helping me to get through until I could finally find the right place and the right time to
Yeah.
release.
I'm glad you're mentioning that. And I was trying to remember if you were familiar with IFS, but
Oh,
yes, it
yes.
is these
Yeah.
protector parts that was our survival as kids, right?
Hmm.
We learned, crying
Exactly.
is dangerous. You and
That's
I
right.
talked a little bit about how
Yeah.
emotions can be determined to be bad. I think sometimes innately as kids we believe emotions are dangerous
Yes.
and we're not safe when we're feeling them, and then these we fragment, and then these
Hmm.
protectors come and they shut it down super effectively.
Hmm.
We survive, yay, but then
Hmm.
we grow and we become more mature and we recognize, hey, I've got all this pain locked inside of me, all this
Hmm.
suffering, which is
Hmm.
exactly what we're talking here, that when we can't be fully alive in our humanity, we experience deep suffering that just
Hmm.
goes on for so long. But that when we have this, when the protectors can move aside and the emotion can come,
Hmm.
it opens us to
Hmm.
being able to be more human or more
Hmm.
fully alive. And I want to, I'm going to bring this episode to a close, but we are
Hmm.
going to, we're
Hmm.
going to talk more about this when we come back, because um, then there can also be this, once the emotion starts coming, right? We might, like you said, you cried nonstop for 2 years, and then it can
Hmm.
be, what's wrong with me that I can't stop? First,
Hmm.
it's what's wrong with me that I can't cry. Then, what's wrong
Hmm.
with me that I can't stop? And we
Yeah.
were, but I loved how you just described it. Was like there was so much that just needed to come forth, and you were
Hmm.
able to allow the space for that to happen,
Hmm.
even though at times it didn't feel great, and your people around you were maybe wondering, like, whoa, are we going to get through this?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I would say, yeah, the story of the Israelites give us a really good picture for how healing works. It's like there's this initial freedom, like when they crossed the Red Sea, and there was this initial freedom and we're exhilarated by it. And then there's the wandering in the wilderness. And that 2 years, that was the wandering in the wilderness for me. And that is really this time where so much of healing is happening. It's the release of everything we've carried.
Mm,
And then there's the step into the promised land, which is, it's not void of battle, it's not void of struggle, but it's a very different place than that wandering in the wilderness, that you just feel like, is this okay? Is there something wrong with me? Do I need to get out of this? And if
mm,
we don't have people who are able to journey with us while we're in the wilderness and say, hey, it's okay. Things do get harder before they get better. That's the journey. It's
mm,
okay. Keep going. This is what we're here for. We
mm.
love you. This is okay. Don't worry. You're going to
Yeah.
come out of it. The promised land is coming.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the work that you do. And that's the work that I do.
exactly.
Like, we
Exactly.
love to walk alongside of people who are in these spaces, because we know we would not have made it if we had not had people that could contain our stories and our emotion and these places where we were transforming from who we were in our locked down, shut
Mm.
down, dissociated
Survival.
spaces,
Mhm.
survival. And then as we began to open up into the freedom and the
Mhm.
life and the
Mhm.
expression and the feeling, and everything can feel foreign in that space. And then to have people that are like, I got you, you're
Mhm.
okay, take a
Mhm.
breath, take
Mhm.
another step. And so I just want to say to our listeners, come back for part two of this conversation. It's a hard place to even pause, even though I know Daniel, I'll be back on this with you in 5 minutes. But our listeners have to wait a whole week
Yes.
for the second part. But such goodness here in talking about what it means to be able to recognize that
Mhm.
our brain is the place where all of this happens. Like it's not choice. It's like
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
feel the sensation. I'm going to repeat this again because I feel like it's so important. We feel the sensations in our body, which then goes through our emotion, the amygdala, that part of our
Mhm.
brain that houses our emotions and our perceptions
Mhm.
and so many of those aspects. But and then we get to the place where we can form objective thought and concrete
Mhm.
directions. But this is our reality, and when we aren't able to access our emotions or express them, the invitation is here. Like um, there is a way, there are ways that we can move forward. And
Mhm.
you have experienced it, Daniel. I have experienced it, and we know many who have. So I
Mhm.
just want to give that hope to our listeners who might be listening and feeling like, oh, I'm so stuck right here.
Mhm.
Um, keep taking steps. I'll just leave it with
That's
that.
right.
Keep
One step at a
taking
time.
steps. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Daniel, thank you so much. And we'll be back for part two.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you.